Hey, what's up, logic fans? Welcome to section 3.4, our fourth section on propositional syntax. Today we're going to go over rules of replacement for arrow and tribar. Let's rock. Alright, so by now you should be familiar with the distinction between rules of inference and rules of replacement, and I'm going to be taking that for granted. So if you want to review that, be sure to check out the videos for section 3.3, where rules of replacement were first introduced. Every rule we introduce today, which is going to include implication, trans, exportation, and equiv, all of these are rules of replacement and not rules of inference. So you can go inside of a sentence and use these on a part of that particular sentence. Okay, let's jump into our first rule of replacement for today, implication, which is very useful because it allows us to switch between the arrow and the V for disjunction. So you can move back and forth between those two. And the rule Impl is the rule that allows us to do this. Let's have a look. So basically, if you've got a conditional, okay, you can convert it into a disjunction, provided you make the antecedent negated. Okay, so you have to add so when you're going from a conditional to a disjunction, you have to add a tilde to the antecedent, okay, and then you leave the consequent absolutely as is, and vice versa. So when you're going from a disjunction to a conditional, you have to already have the negation in place on the left disjunct, and it just disappears. It just falls out, okay, and then you've just got the P part without the negation, and then you've got the Q part here. So let's play a game of permissible or impermissible for uses of implication. So in each of these 6 cases, Impl has been applied. Allegedly, and the question is whether or not that application of Impl is permissible or impermissible. So there's 6 cases here. Pause now, take a look at each one, and tell me whether you think they're permissible or impermissible, and we'll come back and do them together. Pause now. Okay, so we're going to do these together now, and if you take a look at this, so the first one here, from this guy to this guy, this is absolutely permissible, okay, because if you look at it, all right, what's going on here is this A or B part here, that whole thing is P, okay, and it gets negated, and then you got the wedge, and then you got the Q part. So this is a perfect application of implication, and it is permissible, good to go. All right. Let's take a look at this particular case. Is this a permissible application of implication? And the answer is yes, and it uses this. Notice that you've got the negation right here, and so P is just A by itself, and Q is just B, and you've got P arrow Q when you do that, okay? And so that's a perfectly legitimate use of implication. What about this case? Is this okay? No, this is not a legitimate use of implication, okay? This is forbidden. Do not do it. So, of course, you can get from this line or string like this to a string like this, but the question for us is whether you can get from this string to this string in one step using implication, and the answer is no, you cannot do that. There has to be a negation here, all right? And then that negation is going to disappear here. Okay, so this is impermissible for that reason. If you're going from a disjunction to a conditional, there has to be that negation there, and it disappears. Now, it's true that from line 1, this conclusion does follow, but implication does not allow that maneuver. Okay, all right, let's look at this particular case. Can you go from this thing to this thing? And the answer is no, you cannot. Okay, this is impermissible. So what's kind of interesting here is that in this particular case, since you're going from a conditional to a disjunction, we're looking at this situation, and when you do that, you have to add a negation. So the antecedent here, right, since we're moving from a conditional to a disjunction, the antecedent has to be regarded as a whole, and not A is the whole antecedent, all right, and that would have to get negated. So it would end up having to do like this case here. This is what it would have to look like, okay? That's permissible. This case is impermissible, and this case is also impermissible. Forbidden, forbidden, permissible, okay? This is the correct way to do it. Let's look at a couple more here. Try these three. Okay, so these ones were moving from a disjunction to a conditional. So you're looking at this particular application of implication. Pause now. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to pause and think on these, but let's take a look at the first case here. So when you're moving from a disjunction to a conditional, what you have to do is you have to have a negation something for the left disjunct. And so the negation something is this. This is the something. That's P right there, not A. This negation here is just this negation, and then P is the whole rest of it here. And we notice that what happens is that what you do is you write down your P arrow Q, and the leading negation drops off. So this negation drops off, and we're just left with P arrow Q. So this is absolutely permissible and is a correct application of implication. Let's look at this particular case. This is impermissible, right? A negation has to drop out when you're moving from a disjunction to a conditional, all right? And then look at this case here. Yeah, two of them disappear. That's no good either. So this is the correct way to do it in a situation like that. And these two are incorrect. Do not do it. And that's basically the rule of implication. And remember, it's a rule of replacement. So if you find a conditional or a disjunction somewhere buried inside of a big sentence, you can go ahead and apply implication inside of that part of the sentence. All right, our next rule is transportation, abbreviated trans, and basically what it allows you to do is to sort of swap the antecedent and consequent of a conditional, provided you do certain things, and it works both directions, okay? So let's suppose you've got something of the form if P then Q, you can write down not Q arrow not P, all right? So you have to add you switch the Q and the P and you add negations, all right? Similarly, you can go the other way. You can go from if not Q, then not P to if P, then Q. Now notice when you do it this direction, you have to have both the negations in place and they drop out. So it's sort of like it's been double negated for you, but that's the way the syntactic rule, which is following mindless, arbitrary rule following, okay, that's the way it works. So let's go ahead and try some examples together. Okay, so let's do permissible or impermissible here. So each of these 6 here is allegedly a use of trans, okay? And so the question is whether or not trans has been applied permissibly or impermissibly. Pause now. All right, hopefully you've had a chance here, but let's go through these together. So this first case here is absolutely okay. Okay, this is a straightforward instance of this case here. All right, you can probably see that. Now, what about this case here, right? Well, it sets up just like this one, but they forget to switch the antecedent and the consequent. So this is impermissible. Do not do it. Forbidden, okay? Now we get to an interesting case where you've got a negation built in here, and this is this application. It is not this application. This application requires a negation on both the antecedent and the consequent. We only have one here, and so in this case, this whole thing here is Q. So you got P arrow Q, and then you get not Q arrow not P, and so this is absolutely permissible, okay, and it's this use of it. Similarly, same lesson here, it's just that I did it on the A instead of the B, and so you know, this whole thing here is P in this case, and this thing is B, and then you get not Q arrow not P, which in this case is not A. So this is permissible as well. These are permissible uses of trans. Now let's take a look at this case. This is interesting because what I've done here is I've shown you both cases, all right? So basically, when you've got the negation on both sides of the arrow, you can apply trans in either way. So you can do it this way, or you can do it this way. So in this particular case, we did it from here to here. So this whole thing here is P. this whole thing here is Q, and we get not Q, arrow, not P, and that's this use, and that is perfectly fine. But also, since we've got the negation on both sides, right, you can also use this particular case. And in this particular case, what happens is the antecedent and the consequent switch or swap places, but the negations drop out, right? So in this case, this is Q right here, and this is P right here, and you get P, arrow, Q, and the negations have just dropped out. So that's how trans works. Let's try two more applications of trans just to make sure we're on the same page. Permissible or impermissible in these cases. Pause now. Okay, so in this case, this is absolutely permissible. So what I'm emphasizing here is that trans is a rule of replacement. So you can ignore the fact that this is the main connective, all right, and you can go inside this part of this whole sentence, and you can just screw with this part, and we applied trans to get not D, arrow, not B, okay? Do not be tempted to go to not D, arrow, B like that, okay? You can get from this to this, but not in one step with trans. First, you would have to do this, and then you would have to double negate it, okay? So separate steps. Now, let's take a look at this case, and once again, the lesson is the same. This is permissible. This is okay. So I can ignore that this is the main connective. I can go inside of this whole negation sentence, and I can just screw with this part of it, as I've done here, and apply trans because it is a rule of replacement. Okay, all right. Let's try to introduce our next rule of replacement here. Our next rule of replacement, exportation, abbreviated exp or exp. Okay, this is nice and it works both directions. Okay, so what it basically allows you to do is it allows you to unpack ramped up antecedent conditions. So in this particular case, we start with suppose that both P and Q are true. In that event, R is also true. Another way of saying the same thing is to say if this first thing P is true, then provided the second thing Q is true, R is true. And so exportation allows you to sort of unpack your ramped up antecedent conditions this way. And you can also go the other direction. You can go from if this first thing is true, then if the second thing is true, the third thing is true, to if the first and the second thing is true, then the third thing is true. So you can go both directions, and that's what I'm trying to sort of show you here, okay? Both directions are absolutely allowed. And I don't want to rush things, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to spill our examples of exportation into the next video. So check out video 3.4b. See you there.